Hi, I'm Din, and I'm doing a voiceover this time. Um, because I'm doing a redraw of an old piece. The original piece is this one, and it's from February of 2020, so it's 2.5 years old. And it was really interesting to redraw it because I haven't really redrawn something for a while now, and seeing both my own growth and the growth of the character that I'm drawing was really quite rewarding and interesting. I think the main thing is that I don't remember using references at all for the original piece, but you can see that I have references already chosen before I even went into the sketching of this one. I had some trouble with the posing. You can see I'm gonna keep tweaking it for a while. Eventually, I just took her and moved her so to pretend like she was on a, there we go. Now I'm pretending that she's on a even plane, and then I just moved that. That helped a lot in finally figuring out what the heck I was doing wrong. Something kept looking off until I fixed that. But yeah, so this is a character who I've had for approximately the same amount of time. The first painting there is one of the first paintings I ever did of her. Actually, it's probably the first painting I ever did of her, and I was really proud of it at the time. I still think it's really quite charming. And there are things I like about it that I didn't carry over in this redraw, but I think on the whole, this redraw is still a massive improvement. I was kind of hesitant about, or well, I wasn't hesitant, but I kept putting it off. Um, I kept not actually biting the bullet and redrawing this, even though I knew this was the piece that I wanted to redraw, because I was so proud of it back in the day, and I was like, oh god, what if I still prefer it in the end? That would be so demoralizing. But it wasn't. I'm really, really happy with the new one. Um, so yeah, I have all of these references in part because the character that I'm drawing, Anne, she has gained a lot of things. Like all of these animals that I'm drawing are her familiars, and she didn't have familiars when I first made her. So that's why they're absent. So I really wanted to include like some of her new things and new story elements in the new piece to showcase both her growth and my own. So in that vein, I didn't want to copy the original in all of the ways. Obviously, I kept the composition, the fallen log, the rock, and the pose, but I changed the colors to something that I would actually, use today. I do really like the sort of monochrome look of the original, and I like that I kept the background a little bit lighter because it makes Anne stand out overall a little bit better in the piece. There's a contrast issue here that I fix later, where I put the dark tree right behind her face, because that makes her face get a little lost, so I have to correct that later. And I think overall I could have kept the trees a little lighter, like it's in the original, to help everything pop a little bit more. But I like the atmosphere of the new color palette. Obviously, I have a color reference there that I'm drawing from. I find that really, really helpful. I like having a reference for the subject matter and then a different separate reference for the color palette that I want to use. So I knew that I wanted like a blue mist, a blue misty forest, because I think those look spectacular. I like when it's kind of gray and really like the blue sort of makes it mysterious. I think it makes things pop in a different way than the brown palette I had used before, because that felt a little drab in some ways, whereas this feels a little bit more storybook-esque and a little bit more mysterious. So I'm blocking in the colors, and I'm using the lasso tool here and there to help lay down color quickly. That's something I've started doing lately. I didn't used to do it before. I used to go in like by hand and draw along the edges and everything, but I find this works a lot faster and it helps me fuss a lot less, because that's one thing I'm trying to get down on. Like I fuss so much, and I'm trying to be a little bit more efficient and let things go a little bit more. this is where you really see the contrast issue with the tree behind her. I noticed it soon, and I think it's really a good thing to keep your sketches and your color blocking zoomed out like this, because that really helps you catch these things. Like how, there we go, I'm trying to adjust, see if I can just move it, but no. So I painted over to help her face read better. So I think sketching zoomed out, like including when you're putting down the colors, like be messy, put down your basic color blocking before you go into line work and stuff like that, because it really helps you catch all of these mistakes that you can then figure out ahead of time and save yourself the trouble, basically. Because if this was a lined piece, I may have moved the tree entirely, so the lines wouldn't intersect with her face. So, blocking in the familiars, they are made of mist, so I'm not too concerned about them because I'm going to blur them later on. I'm just blocking in their shapes and ensure that they match the color palette. And adding in some more details and everything. I'm quite proud of myself for making her familiars made of mist, because it makes them very easy to draw, because they're just specters really, but they still add a bunch to the piece. There we go. Now I didn't show it, but I've enlarged the canvas because I sketch quite small, and I sketch, as you saw, like off to the side in the canvas, like without. I don't like going out to the edges. It feels way more natural, in my opinion, to be sketching like inside of the canvas rather than going out to the edges, because this stops sort of, I don't know, I think they kind of inhibit your flow a little bit, at least for me. But then when I have all my colors figured out and I'm happy with it, that's when I crop everything and go in and start painting, as you can see. I usually go back to front, so I'm doing the far background first, and then I finish with the main character. So I have the brush that I use and that I didn't use back in the day, all 2.5 years ago. I used opacity all the time. Like I had my brush set to maybe like between 20 and 50% opacity, and I would go over everything with the same brush. But I got a better version of the program that I'm using, and now what I do is that I use like pressure opacity on my tablet, so that the harder I press on the tablet, the higher the opacity is, and then if I go over things very lightly, it's less opacity. So that's what I do first. I go over everything with that sort of brush, so I can control the opacity very easily and very naturally, because it really mimics like using a traditional medium, where if you press hard you get a lot of color. But then when I'm happy with that, I grab a smaller brush in 100% opacity, and I go over everything to get some good edges in and to clarify some things, because when you're working with varying opacities, things can get kind of blurry and a little bit lost, and I like when things look pretty sharp in some select areas. So I'm going over here and there and noting down all of the areas where I want a little bit more definition. So I'm going over everything and like just giving it a pass over of sharp lines, because I think that makes everything pop a lot nicer. And I didn't have that. I think one of the things in the old image is that I didn't have the tool for that in the program that I was using, because it was a very, very old program. But also I don't think I had that mindset either, because I was kind of working within well, both the confines of the program itself, but also I was thinking a little bit less about clarity, I think. So all of the edges in the old one are quite blurry, and all of the everything is quite blurry. And it makes for a sort of hazy impression overall, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not what I want anymore. So that's why I'm going in with very sharp brushes, smaller sharp brushes, to just kind of neaten everything up and add clarity when I feel happy with the overall textures. So I'm doing the exact same thing here with the fallen over tree, and like the same exact process. And this mid ground is on a different layer. I try to keep things, I usually stay on the same layer the entire time, or I used to. I did that for the old one. But I think that gives me a little bit less control. I don't mind doing that. I still think that's a totally valid way to work, even digitally. But these days I tend to have the far background separated from the midground, and foreground is on its own layer as well, and then the characters are all on separate layers. In this case, the familiars are also on a separate layer, and I should have hidden them because it gives me some minor issues later when I set them to their appropriate, like, because they're gonna go on a different blending mode, and I forgot to hide them because I guess I just wanted to have them there for the composition so I could keep that in mind, but that means that the areas behind the fox and the one there, they aren't fully rendered. So it gives me a little bit of a problem later. For the understory here, I'm just kind of winging it. I honestly don't really know what a forest should look like. I probably should have grabbed a reference for that as well to have a better idea, but I just kind of had fun with it, just freehanded in a little bit of sprouts and leaves and like twigs coming up here and there, and I just tried to make it look busy. Drawing rocks is really fun, in my opinion. That's something I didn't realize that I liked until honestly just a year ago. The rock that I have in the original picture is, I think it's a little bit better colored in a lot of ways because it's like a little bit more muted, and this one is a little bit, it stands out a little bit more. But I enjoyed drawing this rock more, and I think that shows. I didn't enjoy drawing the tree, like the inside trunk light area of the tree. I struggled a lot with how to make it look the way I wanted, so I don't know, I just kind of gave up eventually. It's good enough. At some point you have to say that it's good enough, and move on from it. But I think overall it still, communicates pretty well what I wanted it to look like. I think it reads well. Another thing that I'm doing now that I didn't do before is that in the old painting I was zoomed in a lot. I was working zoomed in on sections at a time, whereas as you can tell through my process here, I haven't zoomed in a lot. I'm zooming in for things here and there. Like right now I'm zoomed in on Anne so I can see, so she's taking up a little bit more room, but so I can still see all of her. And I think that's another thing that's really that's been useful, and that has helped me, as like it's made me a better artist to stay zoomed out longer, because that way I have a better understanding of what my entire image looks like. I don't lose sight of the overall composition, and I don't lose sight of everything else that is going on, so I can always make thoughtful decisions. And another thing is that everyone viewing the image will be viewing it zoomed out. They won't see what I've been doing if I'm zoomed in. So there's really no point spending a ton of time on details that won't really be seen unless you're zoomed in. At least that's my opinion, it varies. It also depends a little bit on what you're doing, I think. Same process for N as everything else. I've locked her layer and I'm directly on my sketch layer on her and just painting and refining everything. The thing around her chest are antlers, and getting a good shape for them, and the color for them was a little bit tricky, but I borrowed the color from the inside the jagged tree part. Once I put the colors down, I don't go outside of the color palette, like hardly ever. I just color pick from elsewhere in the image. I think sort of sketching your color decisions from the get-go like that really helps keep everything unified and interesting. Makes it feel cohesive and, I don't know, overall a bit more finished and polished, I think. So I used the same process for her, where I used my pressure opacity brush for everything, and now I'm going over it with a sharp brush. I'm kind of not really doing, it's not line art, but I'm going in and adding a little bit more divisions in the leaves that she's got growing on her so that it's more clear. Again, just adding clarity wherever I can so that it doesn't just look like a blob of things. And then I'll go over the leaf parts with the other colors as well so that it doesn't look like line art exactly, but you know, it's going in and eating up edges and stuff. Since I resized the sketch, the edges are very blurry, so I'm going over all the edges to sharpen them up so they match everything else that I've got going. Painting her little crystal and adding some nice loose strands for her tail to make it look a little bit more alive and detailed. And there we go, adding in some more colors to the leaves. I just kind of jump around. I do whatever I feel like doing at any given time. Like I work back to front in terms of like the layers of the image, but when I'm on a specific layer, I'm just kind of jumping around doing whatever I feel like. Drawing her flowers is easy. It's just 6 strokes from the center out. You can do a lot with a little when it comes to small flowers like this. This is the only time I'm introducing a new color, when I'm going to find a yellow to go in their centers that I'm dotting in there. It's a muted brown yellow to work with the color palette overall. And then adding in her extras, using the lasso tool to help sharpen up some things here and there. I'm really enjoying using the lasso tool lately. I think it's such a good shortcut for everything. These things that are about her are some of her magical powers that are floating and glowing, so I wanted to add a glow to her, but I didn't like how it looked. It just came out really muddy when I was blending it, so I gave up for a hot second and added her little sparkles. And then I went in with a sharp brush instead, and that looked a little bit better. Yeah, and then it's just cleaning everything up and adding in the blur effects and everything for the familiars so that they're looking appropriate because they're made out of mist, so adding the mist as well. And mist is really easy if you're not painting it in, and I'm work smarter, not harder. I'm not gonna paint mist, so and that was another thing. I actually did that on the old one, and I think you can tell it just feels a little bit, I don't know, it's not bad, it's just, you can see the strokes, and I feel like for mist, you shouldn't be seeing the strokes, so either you should paint it with a soft brush, or you should sort of use digital art to your advantage like I did here. And there I had to paint in the tree trunk real quick because I decided I wanted the deer to be behind it. That also loses a little bit of definition for the broken tree. Like, if I'd planned this out better and actually hidden the deer from the get-go, I could have been smarter about it and changed the color of that tree as well so that the broken tree is the forefront and the focus and everything. But yeah, I'm really happy I took the time to do this. I was procrastinating about it a little bit because I wasn't sure. I was like, what if I like the original better? But I didn't. There are things I like about it. I think the monochrome scheme in it is very charming, and I think that the distance from the trees in the background is a little bit better executed than in the one I have now. Obviously, the new version is a little bit more busy as well, but I think you can still see quite a leap in my skills over time, and I'm very happy to see how my character has evolved as well. So yeah, it was fun for me to do. A friendly reminder to all artists to redraw your art sometimes, because that way you get a physical receipt that, hey, you did improve, you're not stagnating, because you never actually are, even if it may feel that way. Yeah, thanks for watching.